On a misty Wednesday evening, the kind where the rain whispers against windows and city lights smear like watercolors on glass, Lena stepped through the employee entrance of the Gilded Plate. Her sneakers, worn at the soles and perpetually damp, made soft slaps against the marble kitchen floor, a stark contrast to the opulence that awaited her beyond the swinging doors. The Gilded Plate was no ordinary restaurant. It was the kind of place where the hush of wealth draped every conversation, where a single entree could swallow a working-class paycheck, and where perfection wasn't a goal, it was an expectation. Inside, every detail was curated to exude exclusivity. Polished crystal glasses that caught the golden glow of pendant lights, silverware arranged with surgical precision, and servers who moved like dancers, silent and precise. Lena had learned long ago to blend into that atmosphere, to bury her exhaustion behind a serene smile, and to let the white linen uniform cover the tremors of anxiety that came with each shift. She knew how to read a table before they sat down, how to anticipate displeasure before it was voiced, how to serve without being seen. But tonight, something in the air felt charged, like static before a storm. She sensed it as she tied her apron, creased and frayed despite her best efforts, and glanced at the guest list posted near the hostess stand. One name jumped out, cold and sharp on the page: Victor Crane. It wasn't just that he was wealthy. Many of the restaurant's patrons were. But Crane's reputation preceded him like a shadow: brilliant, ruthless, known to wield his fortune like a blade. His presence wasn't a visit, it was an event. For Lena, whose world was dictated by hourly wages and the sting of overdue bills, the idea of serving a man like Crane was more than intimidating, it was a threat. She had encountered difficult customers before, men who treated her like part of the decor, women who sneered at her shoes. But Crane was different. His cruelty was not careless, it was deliberate. It was almost sport. As the clock crept towards 7 p.m., Lena took her place in the dining room, eyes scanning the door. The low murmur of classical music floated through the air, mingling with the quiet clink of glassware. Outside, the rain thickened. Inside, tension quietly gathered, waiting for the entrance that would unsettle the fragile balance of power in the room. Victor Crane was a man sculpted by ambition and hardened by years of relentless pursuit. To the outside world, he was the embodiment of success, a billionaire tech magnate whose empire stretched across continents, his name spoken with a mixture of admiration and fear in boardrooms and elite social circles alike. But beneath the tailored suits and the polished veneer lay a man shaped by shadows, by memories that whispered of vulnerability long buried beneath layers of power. As he entered the Gilded Plate that evening, Crane carried the weight of 1,000 battles, both won and lost. His jaw was set, his eyes sharp and calculating, the kind that missed nothing yet revealed little. There was a hunger in him, not for food or comfort, but for control, a need to dominate the room as he had dominated markets and men. Every movement was deliberate, every word a weapon sharpened by years of cutting down rivals and dismissing those he deemed beneath him. Yet, beneath the arrogance and the cold exterior, there was a trace of something else, an echo of a younger man, once less certain, once fragile. Years ago, before the private jets and sprawling mansions, Victor Crane had been Vic, a struggling coder burning the midnight oil in a cramped apartment, haunted by his own insecurities and the sneers of those who saw him as insignificant. That memory lurked in the corners of his mind, a wound he had buried beneath layers of success and cruelty. It was a wound he never allowed himself to revisit, but it shaped every interaction, every demand for respect. His relationship with power was complicated, a paradox of seeking validation through dominance while secretly fearing the very vulnerability he projected onto others. His temper was a mask, a shield forged in the fires of past humiliation. In his world, kindness was weakness, respect had to be earned through fear or wealth. Yet tonight, something about the waitress assigned to him unsettled that carefully constructed armor. Lena was different, not because she was new or fragile, but because in her eyes he glimpsed something unexpected, a quiet strength, a refusal to be diminished despite the gulf between their worlds. It was a challenge he hadn't anticipated, and it made him uneasy in a way that was unfamiliar and unwelcome. As he prepared to assert his dominance with his usual bluster, a flicker of doubt crossed his mind. Was this encounter merely another exercise in power, or something more profound that might stir the shadows he'd long tried to forget? Victor Crane was a man at war with himself, wielding his fortune like a weapon to keep the past at bay, yet on the cusp of an encounter that might unravel the carefully guarded walls he had built. Tonight, the game was about to change, and neither Victor nor Lena fully understood the roles they were about to play in each other's story. The tension in the room thickened the moment Victor Crane's voice shattered the usual hum of the gilded plate. His shout was not just loud, it was an eruption, a calculated display of power meant to remind everyone, especially Lena, of her place. "This isn't rare," he barked, slamming the plate with an aggression that sent ripples of unease through the patrons. The restaurant's elegant atmosphere seemed to crack under the force of his anger. Glasses paused midair, conversation stilled, and eyes locked onto the escalating scene. For a split second, Lena felt the familiar sting of humiliation creep into her chest, a weight she had carried countless times before. But beneath that, something stronger surged. She inhaled deeply, feeling the hum of adrenaline blend with a resolute calm she had nurtured through years of hardship and silent endurance. This was more than a bad night or a difficult customer. It was a test, a moment where her dignity and sense of self demanded defense. Victor's sneer was a weapon designed to cut deep. "You think this is acceptable?" he spat, voice booming, each word laced with contempt and entitlement. To him, the world was a stage where he was the undisputed lead, and any disruption to his narrative was an affront to be crushed. His wealth was the armor behind which he hid his insecurity, his power the shield against the vulnerability he had long refused to face. But Lena met his gaze, steady and unyielding. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft yet carried an unspoken force that rippled through the silent room. "Respect costs nothing, Mr. Crane." The words hung in the air like a challenge, simple yet profound, disarming in their clarity. It wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a mirror reflecting the raw truth of their collision, a truth Victor had buried beneath millions and ruthless conquests. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the background jazz seemed to hold its breath. For a man used to command and submission, this quiet defiance was unsettling. Victor blinked, momentarily stripped of his usual dominance, caught off guard by a waitress who refused to be cowed. His mind raced, flashing back to his own past, those nights spent scrabbling for respect, the sting of mockery from those who saw him as less than worthy. Was this moment a reflection of that forgotten self, now turned outward and magnified? As Lena turned to leave, carrying the plate back to the kitchen, she was unaware of the tremor her words had sent through the billionaire's carefully constructed psyche. She fought to steady her hands, to hold on to composure, knowing that this confrontation was not just about a meal, it was a silent battle of wills, a test of human dignity against the corrosive power of pride and wealth. In that charged moment, the collision between two vastly different worlds was laid bare, not through grand gestures, but in the quiet, fierce assertion of respect, a spark that threatened to ignite something neither of them fully understood yet. Victor sat back in his chair, the usual fire in his eyes replaced by a flicker of something far less familiar, confusion, perhaps even vulnerability. The room's expectant silence pressed down on him like a weight he hadn't anticipated. His entourage exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the shift but unsure how to navigate the unexpected crack in their leader's armor. For the first time in years, Victor felt the sting of doubt seep through his carefully constructed facade of invincibility. The waitress's words echoed relentlessly in his mind. Respect costs nothing. Simple, unadorned, yet devastating in their quiet power. He traced the edge of the table absently, memories surfacing unbidden, late nights coding in a cramped apartment, the sting of humiliation from a superior who once mocked his mistakes, the burning drive that had fueled his rise to fortune and power. That man, Vic, was buried beneath layers of wealth and ego, but tonight, that memory clawed its way to the surface. It was a reminder of why he had built his empire, to never feel small again. And yet, here he was, embodying the very cruelty that had once bruised him. Meanwhile, Lena retreated to the kitchen, the brief tremble in her hands a testament to the emotional weight of the encounter. Her colleagues regarded her with a mixture of admiration and sympathy, sensing the gravity behind her composed exterior. She wanted no fanfare, only to finish her shift, but inside, a quiet storm brewed. That moment had demanded everything from her: courage, grace, and an unyielding belief in her own worth, even when confronted by raw hostility and entitlement. Back at the table, Victor's mind churned. The veneer of dominance that had defined him began to chip, replaced by a dawning self-awareness. He watched Lena move through the room, noting the worn sneakers beneath her apron, the kindness she extended to others unnoticed by the patrons. Something in him softened, a flicker of empathy that had long been buried beneath his ruthless persona. When Lena returned with a corrected dish, her tone professional and free of bitterness, Victor met her eyes and, for the first time, offered a genuine thank you. It was a small gesture, but loaded with significance, an unspoken acknowledgement of respect earned and a subtle crack in the fortress of pride he had built around himself. That night, the clash between billionaire and waitress became more than a moment of conflict. It transformed into a quiet lesson in humility, dignity, and the human need for respect that transcends status or wealth. The aftermath was not a dramatic change, but a subtle shift, a reminder that beneath every mask lies a vulnerable soul capable of growth if only given the chance to see beyond the surface. In the days that followed, a subtle transformation unfolded within Victor Crane, one that was invisible to the bustling world that had long celebrated his ruthless efficiency and unwavering dominance. The encounter with Lena lingered in his mind, not as a fleeting irritation but as a persistent echo that unsettled the foundation of his self-perception. The hardened titan who once saw respect as a currency to be bought and wielded now found himself grappling with the quiet power of genuine human connection. It was a jarring contrast to the cutthroat battles in boardrooms and the cold calculations of wealth accumulation that had defined his existence. Victor began to notice the small moments he had always dismissed: the exhausted look on the face of a server carrying too many plates, the polite nod from a busboy, the subtle kindness in a stranger's gesture. These glimpses into the humanity around him stirred a latent empathy that he had long buried beneath layers of ambition and pride. Inside, the psychological walls he had constructed over decades started to crumble, not with the dramatic collapse of a thunderstorm but with the slow, relentless drip of awareness. He recalled the shame of his younger self, the boy who once spilled coffee and endured ridicule, and recognized the mirror his own harshness had held up to others like Lena. The lesson was bitter but necessary. Power without respect was a hollow victory, a fragile illusion masking insecurity and fear. Victor's reflection in the mirror became less about the magnate who conquered industries and more about the man who had forgotten how to be vulnerable. At the restaurant, Lena sensed the change too, not in grand gestures, but in the way Victor's gaze softened, how his commands grew quieter, his demeanor less abrasive. He no longer demanded the impossible with disdain, but observed with a quiet curiosity, perhaps even a growing respect. Their brief exchanges, once charged with tension, now carried a tentative acknowledgement of mutual dignity. Lena, ever resilient, maintained her professionalism but allowed herself a quiet hope that respect, once given freely, could ripple outward, touching even the most hardened hearts. Victor's transformation was neither swift nor complete. It was a slow awakening, an internal dialogue fraught with the tension between old habits and new understanding. Yet, in that evolution lay the profound truth that true power is not measured by dominance or wealth, but by the capacity to recognize one's own humanity in others and to respond with kindness and respect. This change, born from a single moment of confrontation and courage, marked the beginning of a more profound journey, not just for Victor Crane, but for anyone who has ever sought to reclaim their own dignity amidst the chaos of life. As the evening deepened and the soft hum of the restaurant's jazz resumed, a quiet resolution settled between Victor and Lena, invisible yet unmistakably present. Victor, once the embodiment of arrogance and entitlement, sat with a newfound stillness in his posture, the earlier blaze of anger replaced by contemplative silence. He had witnessed the power of a simple truth spoken with unwavering calm, a reminder that respect transcended wealth, status, and fleeting moments of frustration. The realization was both humbling and unsettling, stirring long-buried reflections about the man he had become versus the man he once aspired to be. Lena, returning to her rhythm of service, carried herself with a quiet strength that defied the exhaustion etched into her worn shoes and faded uniform. Her single sentence had done more than silence a billionaire's roar. It had shifted the unseen balance of power in that gilded room, reminding all who bore witness that dignity is not a privilege reserved for the powerful, but a right inherent in every human soul. She moved with renewed purpose, not because she sought recognition or reward, but because in that moment she had reclaimed a part of herself that no amount of pressure or disdain could diminish. As Victor watched her from across the room, something softened within him, a fragile openness, a tentative respect that hinted at change yet to come. His gratitude, quietly spoken and unexpected, was not just for the corrected meal but for the lesson she had imparted without malice or bitterness. It was a reminder that even those who appear invincible carry scars, and that true strength often lies in humility and empathy. The night closed not with grand declarations or dramatic reversals, but with a shared understanding that transcended their disparate worlds. In the intersection of their lives, a profound truth emerged. Respect, once given, has the power to heal, transform, and bridge the divides we build between ourselves. And in that quiet exchange, both Victor and Lena found a fleeting but precious glimpse of something far greater than wealth or status, a connection rooted in shared humanity, fragile yet unbreakable.